Welcome to the Audiobook Lovin Series, a month-long event celebrating the authors and narrators that bring romance stories to life. Listen along as Viviana, Enchantress of Books, interviews your favorite writers and voices, share special guest posts, and stay tuned for some special information at the conclusion of the episode.
Today I have the pleasure of chatting with guest author Penelope Ward. Welcome to Audiobook Lovin, Penelope. How are you doing today?
Great. Thank you for having me, Viviana.
Oh, thank you for being here. Why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been writing, and how you became an author?
Sure. So I have been writing since 2013, when I feel like a lot of people broke onto the scene. I was at the time a sort of bored housewife that worked from home part of the time and was raising two kids. I was in my mid 30s, and I really had gotten into reading as a passion, mostly romance novels, pretty much exclusively romance novels, and just came up with the wild idea that I was going to create a story of my own one day, and started writing this and reading it to my friend on Skype chapter by chapter, never expecting that anything was going to come of it. And then basically it all sort of happened what seems like overnight when I learned how to self-publish it and get it out there. At that time, I didn't realize I was breaking onto the scene at a very exciting time when there weren't a ton of people self-publishing like there are today. So I got very lucky. It was the timing was right.
Yeah, no, that's very important sometimes. Yeah.
It is. Timing can be everything. It can
Mhm.
literally make the difference between, something happening or not happening. And every moment, every day of your life, can turn you into a direction that you didn't anticipate. So it's all very important. But yeah, it was total luck.
Mhm. And how many books have you written in total at this point?
I had to actually count them the other day. Yeah, I think it's about 15 of my own and about 12 or 13 of the co-writes. So it's edging on 30 books now. It's I write about 3 books a year, and that's because I consider the two halves of the two co-writes one book, because I do a half and a half equals one, and then I do 2 solo books. So I pretty much release 3 books a year, and we're coming up on probably close to 30 books combined now, between the co-writes and my own, which seems nuts.
Yeah, and you co-write with Vi Keeland. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, so around, I'd say 2014, 2015, we decided we were just friends, and we met in a box set. We had thrown some of our books together with some other authors in a box set, and we stayed friends after that experience, and one day just decided that we were going to try our hand at co-writing as for fun. And we never expected that it was going to turn into something bigger. I don't think anybody knows whether they can co-write with someone until they actually start the process. When you're writing by yourself and you're used to that, it's a little strange all of a sudden beginning to write with someone else, or the thought of that, but it actually happened quite naturally with us. Our styles are pretty similar. We realized we really enjoyed it, so we kept going.
How does that writing happen between the two of you? Because I've noticed when I've spoken to other co-authors, they have different ways of doing it. Either they'll write the different characters, or they'll divide and conquer the chapters, or it's a scene and ideas. How do you guys go about that?
Yeah, so we literally, one person starts and we each have a word count goal. So say the first person starts and hits the 3,000 word count. We have, say, 4 or 5 days to get that done. Then we just turn it over to the other person, and wherever that author happened to leave off, the other one picks up. So I always enjoy getting what she wrote, because I can then read and see where she took the story. We do a little bit of plotting ahead of time, but nothing so heavy that I would ever really know exactly where she took the story at any given point. We kind of like know where the story's going, the beginning, middle, and end. But in terms of all the little parts and all the little scenes, that's something that's pretty much a surprise to us every time we get it back from each other. So we literally pass it back and forth like a ball. Sometimes it ends up that I write the guy point of view, and sometimes it just ends up that I'm writing the woman. It just depends on where it falls. So we both get to write both characters, and we both get to experience them equally. I know some authors that co-write, one will write the male, one will write the female, but that's not how we do it. So we literally just pass it back and forth like a ball.
Wow. As soon as you said that passes back and forth, I'm like, oh, like a slam book. And I'm going, there you go, Vivi, dating yourself.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's like I consider it like improv. It's just
Yeah.
very, very improvisational.
Yeah, it is. And talk about, because I can only imagine how if you really wanted to mess with her,
Yeah.
how that would go. I'm like, wait, I thought we were writing a shifter.
Yeah, right. I mean, you could totally do that. Yeah. And I mean, there's been times where I've left off at a certain point that I know she's going to either kill me or start laughing. I always use this example, but in our book, Playboy Pilot, there was a scene where the couple basically, I think they had just had sex for the first time, and it was outdoors or something. And then he looked around and he couldn't find his pants. And they're stuck outside in like this like neighborhood or outside in like the woods or something. He's looking around, he can't find his pants, and then the scene just ends that way. And so she texted me or messaged me and said, "So what happened to his pants?" And I said, "That's for you to find out. That's for you to figure out." Yeah, so I mean, it's just funny. We can do funny things like that, and then it's always fun to see what the other person's going to come up with when you leave something like that for them.
Yeah, well, it gets, also creative. Like, where would you have left your pants,
Yeah, I
How
mean,
do
what
you find
happened?
them?
Yeah, like just and then she comes up with this crazy solution which worked. So it's just it's fun.
Like I say, well, it's definitely good that you guys have that relationship with each other. Again, keeping things interesting at the same time that you're able to mess around with each other. It's kind of cool.
Yes, you have to be able to enjoy this process or it's not going to work. It's sort of like a marriage because you're stuck with this person because your books continue to be out there and they continue to sell. And so you're basically like it's a business relationship that really you can't really ever dismantle unless you unpublish the books. And when we continue to write together, I mean, we do it because we truly enjoy it. Neither one of us has to co-write. We do because we want to, and we do have a good time.
Listeners and readers love it when the two of you get together and write your books.
Yeah, we're happy that they do because we like doing it. If they stop liking it, we'd probably stop. So I'm glad that they do.
Yes, they do. When it comes down to the books that you write, the genre that you primarily write in is contemporary romance, correct?
Yes, pretty much exclusively.
Yes. And what is it about that genre that you love so much?
Well, I'm not sure that I would necessarily know how to write any other aspect of romance very well. I wouldn't be able to do historical, for example. I like the fact that contemporary romance is sort of a mix of a bunch of things. It's for the most part, you do have graphic sex scenes, which I mean, I'm not a clean writer. I wouldn't say that I'm the most explicit writer of sex either, but I think clean romance would bore me. I feel like historical I wouldn't be able to write. And so when you start narrowing down, the type of romance that fits your personality and fits what you like to write, contemporary is really it for me. I do write, some of my stories would be considered new adult or a cross between new adult and contemporary. But my stories just, for the most part, fall under the contemporary realm because that's what I like to read. And it's just a good mix of, angst, humor, modern situations.
So with the new adults, what is your age range for that? Because every time I talk to somebody, it's always different depending on who they are.
Yeah, and it's probably open to interpretation. I always look at new adult as sort of just slightly over the young adult age range with some sex, as opposed to young adult, which would be the teen years and minimal like sexual references, that kind of thing. So new adult, I consider starts around like 17 or 18 years old, maybe. I try to have my characters be of legal age before much happens in, in terms of a sexual way. But like new adult, an example of one of my new adult books, which is sort of a mix between new adult and contemporary because it's a second chance romance, would be Stepbrother Dearest. Because the characters were 17 when the story started. They were really 18 when they got together. And then there was a break for several years where the second chance component came about. So that book would be an example of a new adult story that sort of turned into a contemporary romance. But new adult, I consider sort of college, the beginning of college age to the end of college age. But I think it is open to interpretation in terms of how people see it.
Yeah, because I've heard anything between like starting at 20 through their 25, 26, and I'm going, that's adult.
Yeah,
Where I kind of think like you, it's a little younger, like at least 17, 18,
yeah.
20, 21.
And I do think it's open to interpretation, but for some reason the number 17 sticks in my head because they're almost 18. But I kind of like see young adult as like maybe 16 is the cutoff, and then 17, 18, 19 starts to veer into new adult, and like, 22 or so might be, but I think everybody would see it differently.
And I know that when that first came out, I had a hoot because I'm going, okay, so we have new adults. What are the next one? Vintage and antique adults? Because when we're trying to figure out what age group they were talking about, I'm like, okay, where do we all fit in?
Yeah, I mean, I think a great example of new adult is college. That
Yeah.
to me is the essence of new adult. Is any college story to me would be considered new adult. Um, Most of my characters tend to fall in their mid 20s to late 20s, but I have had a range of starting at about 17 to about 35.
Mhm. And what is it about that age group that you tend to kind of write in
I
primarily?
I think it has to do with the fact that that particular time in a person's life is when they tend to be experiencing a lot of things that might warrant making it a good story, I guess. I mean, once someone is settled, and that's not to say that stories with older characters aren't be very interesting, but I feel like once they're settled and a little bit older and married, there's less opportunity to tell a certain type of story, one that might be filled with angst and so forth. So I just feel like the stories themselves lend themselves to characters oftentimes in their 20s. And that, in conjunction with the fact that I think I have a very youngish mind and a very immature spirit. So I tend to like to write characters in their 20s because I kind of feel like I'm living vicariously through them, I think.
Hmm. Okay, cool. I always wanted to ask that.
Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
just personal choice, really. You see
Yeah,
some authors that are always writing older characters, and it has to be that that's what they prefer.
yeah. And they actually have to enjoy it. Otherwise, they won't be writing as much or at all.
Yeah, you
And
really
the
do.
story won't come out as good.
You really do. And that's why oftentimes when someone asks an author, why don't you write a story about XYZ? The answer generally, whether they admit it or not, is just that they probably don't want to. And they probably haven't been able to imagine that story very clearly. And that story is just not the story that happens to be in their imagination at the moment.
How do you get these ideas for your books?
It really starts with a very general idea, but in terms of the actual parts to the story, those come to me very sporadically and organically. So I can start out by saying, gee, I'd like to write a story about neighbors, and I'd like to write a story about a stepbrother who all of a sudden moves in with this his father that he hasn't seen in years. And I start out with that general idea, but it really doesn't start out with much more than that. And then it's when I start just typing out those first words and really forcing out those first words that I start to see the story in my head, very much like a movie. I can even hear the characters' voices. And I feel like a lot of authors would probably say they have that same experience. They can see the story, they can hear the story. And much like you and I don't know what we're going to be talking about 5 minutes from now, the character's dialogue just kind of happens. And it's very hard for me to explain how it happens because these words, these ideas, these images just come to my head. So I kind of feel like I don't know even how they get there. I'm sort of the tool by which they come out onto the paper, which is really interesting to me because I don't think I even fully understand it.
Well, it's like the magic of writing, I think, because
It
it is
is
a magical experience, the
very
fact
hard
that,
to
mhm,
explain.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Well, just the experience alone, it's having to figure out, like, it's the words are in your head, processing it out, whether you do it, traditional old fashioned and writing things out in notebooks or you're typing it away. Or nowadays, people, I think sometimes are even doing the audio notes for their stories.
Well, there's so many different ways to do it. I think the notebook on an iPhone is very useful when you're out and about and you get an idea and you need to jot it down. Um, I tend to write, I used to do a little bit of dictation, but I haven't done as much of that lately. But mostly, I feel like when I'm staring at that blank page and I'm typing out the words, that's when the ideas come. Just
Mhm.
staring at the page and typing.
That's good. Yeah, I've been told that's when things don't flow.
But I think everybody's different.
Yeah.
I find that I have to see the words for it to like really flow. Like I did try dictation and stuff, and I thought that that would help me, but it really was kind of difficult for me when I wasn't actually seeing the words on the paper, which is interesting. But when you're motivated is not really a choice. So just staring at the paper is just not going to do it. You have to be in the mood, and you have to be in the right frame of mind. And sometimes you sit down and write, and it just doesn't happen. And more often than not, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever been in a situation where you've been out and about, either dinner with, significant other or friends and family, and all of a sudden the words just start coming and you're going, crap, where's that napkin? Or phone?
Cannot tell you how often I'm having a conversation with someone and they think I'm following along with them and I'd have no idea what they're saying because my head is in my story because I thought of something and I'm sitting there struggling to remember what I'm thinking so that I can remember it the next time I sit down at the computer, and I'm sitting there staring at somebody nodding. But I'm a very good, I think I'm a I'm a pretend good friend, I guess. I don't know what the right word is, but like I can seriously look at someone, let them talk, nod and smile and just be plotting my story in my head.
Oh, wow. So you're like a good soundboard then.
I mean, it sounds silly, but it's like sometimes you have to let those ideas flow when they come to you, and you're in the middle of a conversation. So you just smile and nod and then kind of daydream. Yeah, crazy.
Well, the good thing about being a good soundboard, though, is that sometimes we just need that. We don't need someone to be giving us advice and stuff. We just need to kind of work the plan, the plan out in our heads outside,
That,
vocally.
that
So you're perfect for that.
That is so true. I find that it doesn't even matter if I don't say anything with some of my friends. As long as I'm nodding and smiling and listening, that's all they needed.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the perk of being an indie author is that you get to choose, the stories, and you get to choose the release dates and stuff like that. And you also get to choose your covers.
Yeah. And,
You have good covers.
I it's funny because I've grown to actually hate the cover search process because I feel like the cover is very important to a book. I mean, the saying "don't judge a book by its cover" is there for a reason because people do, and it is very stressful because a lot lies on that, and I just feel like it's very important, but it's very stressful because the entire internet is at your disposal, but it's very hard sometimes to secure a photo. It's not always easy, even if you find the right one. So it's a very stressful process. But yeah, as an indie publisher, I am able to have total control, creative control, which is a great feeling. Vi and I have published a few books now through Montlake Romance, which is a division of Amazon Publishing, and they've been very good to work with. But not every publisher necessarily gives the author freedom to choose certain things. So that's very important to me.
I think sometimes people don't, because they see the hot looking guy or the cover that's really great and it has the right colors and everything, and they think, oh, that's pretty easy. But selecting that artwork, finding the stock image or finding the photographer to get the exclusive rights,
Oh yeah.
because you don't want to have the cover that's the exact same as everybody else.
There's so much involved.
It is, and it's tiring.
It's very tiring, and sometimes it doesn't work out either. I've found and fell in love with some images in the past that I wasn't able to get. Either the person doesn't want to be on the book, or the photographer doesn't want to sell it, or it's very interesting. There's a bit of a stigma with romance novels, I think, and sometimes people don't want to be known as the next Fabio, or they always have this thing in their head about Fabio from the 80s. And I and it's really a wrong impression because what people like in this day and age don't realize that in some cases being on a romance novel is going to get you more exposure than being on a magazine.
True.
Because romance readers are so hungry, and they appreciate a good romance cover, and it's like unfortunate sometimes that certain people can't see that, but I've had very few instances where people did not want to be on the cover, but that has happened, and it's a bummer, when you find the right photo and you just can't make it work.
True. Yeah. And I know there's been a couple of photographers too that have realized that it's a good niche and their careers have exploded, that they do things for magazines and other places, but they're known and most well known in the romance world because
Yeah.
they're the ones that shoot the guys.
It's true, and it all started probably with some author finding one of their photos, contacting them and saying, "Hey, I'd like to purchase this." And then they realized that a lot of authors started following them, and then it just exploded from there because there is a need out there for romance covers, and it's really not going away anytime soon.
I know that some of them have been even, I love it when they do the photos and then, but there's a graphic artist involved where they may change a couple of things of the photos to make it a bit more personalized to the book, because the other thing too is like a pet peeve of mine. I know that sometimes the authors can't help it, is
Yep.
when the model in the cover is, brunette,
I
but in the
know.
book they're blonde.
That happens a lot with my foreign editions, like, because you sell a book to a foreign publisher, they have the full rights to choose the cover. So sometimes I'll say, well, I have international rights for my photo, feel free to use it. But for whatever reason, they choose their own. And like the guy will be blonde when my guy was brunette or whatever. And I'll say, oh, but it's their choice. Yeah, but that can totally be distracting. And I do find I'm one of those people that I actually have a really hard time not picturing whoever's on the cover as the person in my head. Even if I want to picture someone else, I just can't do it. I can't unsee it. So that's why it's so important for me to pick someone that represents who I see my character, at least.
It's important. Like I said, for us, it's one of those where we're reading, we see the photo, we see the cover, whether it's on Amazon or on Audible, and we're like going, okay, so he has this, he has a rough, blah, blah, blah. He has this kind of hairstyle and everything. And then it's the complete opposite of when we're reading and we're going, hey.
Yep, I totally. Yep, so true.
It's like, this is what I was imagining, not that. Yeah. Speaking of Audible, what made you decide to make your titles available in the audio format?
Well, I've always loved listening to books myself. I prefer to listen as opposed to read because I feel like I can get so much more in. I can listen when I'm doing housework or listen when I'm exercising. And I feel like I was unfortunately late to the game in some ways because as a new author, so back in say 2014, I didn't know how to put my books into audio and I didn't know how to sell the rights to an audiobook to a company like Audible. And when my first book did really well, Step Brother Dearest, I had an agent at the time who I said, well, now this book is doing really well. Can you please sell this book to into audio? Because I had no clue how to produce my own audiobooks or to hire a company to do it. So I sold the rights to my first few books, and I didn't know at that time that I could self-publish audio. Over time, I realized, hey, I can actually, yes, I have to put up the cost up front to produce this, but I can then keep a bigger portion of the royalties and actually own my audiobook and have more control over it. So after my first few books were sold, I decided that I preferred to self-publish through ACX. And at that point, it was just really important to me because I saw the fact that there's really two different groups of people. Those that solely listen and those that solely read. And in not putting my books in audio, I had really been missing out all that time, even the first year and a half that I didn't have my first few books in audio. I'd been missing out on all these people that couldn't hear my stories because they only listen to audiobooks. So the more books I put out, the more I realized how important audio is. I actually plan all of my releases around my audio. So I will book my narrator 6 months in advance. And so I pick my release date then and there because I want to make sure that if I can arrange it in a way that the ebook comes out with the audio. It's just very important to me to try and do that because I realize now how important and how big the audio listener base is.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes some of the authors that don't realize how important it is to have them at the same time. Now, we all understand that there's some times where things are out of the control, whether it's ACX taking their sweet ass time or the narrator not being available. Because I'm another one that says, if you truly want this narrator because they're going to be the one of that voice and they're not available, then it's okay to wait.
Yeah.
Because it's the vision and it's what they're bringing to the character. But sometimes they don't really think sometimes about the listeners, or at least that's how may come across. So anytime that there's a difference in release between the audio and the ebook, sometimes you'll hear the grumbling, like, why?
Yeah, I think there are so many reasons for that. There can be a lot of different reasons for that. I think in some cases it may be that the author hasn't caught on yet to the fact they're missing out on this huge chunk of followers because the people don't tend to read and they only like to listen. In some cases it's that. In some cases it could be finances. In some cases it could definitely be narrator scheduling because of the fact that narrators are in such high demand now because people are catching on. So everybody, there is a set pool of narrators that are probably consistently busy every single day, which is great. And that's why you have to book so far in advance.
Yeah, it's true. I always make fun of them sometimes, or rather have fun with them and say, so are you booked through the year 2045?
Yeah, I mean, it's great. It's awesome. But it does keep the authors on their toes, because you do have to say, well, hey, if I have a British character coming up in the middle of next year and I want Shane East for that, I better book him now, because someone else could book him and he's not going to be available. So yeah, you do have to think ahead, like way ahead, at least 6 months ahead. And then you need to stick to it. I mean, that audio is what forced me as an indie publisher to finally adhere to a schedule. I used to almost brag about the fact that, oh, I can just pick a release date whenever and I can just drop my book without even announcing it. But I can't do that anymore. Not if I want to publish with my audio. I have to 6 months in advance, and I have to stick to that date, and I have to know almost exactly to the day when I'm going to present that manuscript to ACX to give them enough time to put it up.
Because you have the control and you've published these the audiobooks on your own, the you'll be able to select any narrator that you really want, correct?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I use a lot of the same narrators because I like them, and oftentimes I'll just hear their voice automatically, and because I know they're popular, and people will search for narrators before they'll search for authors in some cases. So you want to be that person that accidentally gets found because they were looking for Andy Arndt or Sebastian York. But at the same time, I do need to change it up at times too. So depending on the character and how you hear that voice, and you figure you know enough narrator voices now to see who best matches that. There are a lot of just factors that go into the decision. But if you're willing to wait and book in advance, when you're a self-publisher, you do have some choices, and that's a great thing.
There's so many up and coming awesome narrators that are out there that are relatively new, but they're starting to get the followings. People are starting to recognize their names more, or people are talking about them. So that's another opportunity if you ever wanted to try someone new.
Well,
You can always,
yeah, absolutely, and it's almost absolutely necessary now too, because there are so many more people producing into audio and putting their books in audio, that you need more people that are catching on and that people are wanting to listen to. So absolutely, I mean, there are so many gems out there that I'm sure I've never heard, and hopefully I will.
yeah. When it comes down to casting, like the narrators, do you have a similar process as you more or less, or I would think you would more or less have when it comes down to looking at the photos for a cover? Are you actively listening to, just kind of going through Audible and checking people out? Are you asking for suggestions from your readers? How do you go about discovering that new voice?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I haven't used enough myself of new voices. An example, though, of some new voices that I've been listening to, because Vi and I don't know if you've heard, but we are starting a world based on our Cocky Hero books.
Mm-hmm, yep.
And I feel like those books, because those ones they are produced through Audible, but we've been given some choices recently for new narrators that we're approving for the various projects, and it's giving me an opportunity to hear more voices and get some just definitely get used to some new narrators. So that's a good thing. But yeah, I mean, there are so many voices out there now, narrators who just are going to probably in the next couple of years, you'll know their names, because the audiobook industry is growing so fast.
No, that's huge, and it continues, which is always good because we love the audiobooks, so it works out perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, for me, an audiobook is just like effortless. I don't want to have to look at a screen after I've been working all day. I want to just be able to close my eyes and have someone tell me the story. And some people say the opposite. I know there are some people that say, I just get so distracted by the voice. If the voice isn't right, I can't enjoy it. I don't feel necessarily I'm so much like that. I do tend to get used to the voice after a while if it's not what I was imagining it would be, but I definitely prefer to just close my eyes and let the story be told to me and experience some of the things that you can experience by hearing the voices.
Have you seen, or have you done where your writing style, as far as how the words end up on the page, change a little bit based on the fact that this is going to be an audiobook versus maybe when you first started and you weren't thinking about the audiobooks?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, if I know who the narrator is going to be, sometimes I hear that voice as I'm typing out, which is really freaky.
Right? That's so freaky.
Yeah, yeah, if you wanna hear the narrator say something specific, really it does. Absolutely, I can sometimes literally, like, if I'm writing a British character, I hear the British accent, and I'm typing out in that voice, so absolutely, I feel like that's definitely helpful in being able to imagine that, and, yeah, if you feel like something might sound awkward coming from a certain narrator, yeah, maybe that would impact what you write.
Sometimes I feel like when it's not in audio, and back in the days, there was a lot more of the narrative of the character in the head, like their own inner voices,
Mhm.
versus now having it more having those conversations, whether it's with the best friend or with a significant other, the hero, where they're having that dialogue more vocally versus just internally.
Yeah, I'm a huge dialogue writer. Every author is different. I think some authors prefer to write certain things. I actually prefer to write dialogue and then go back and fill in all the other things. Sometimes I'll just write straight dialogue for like the entire day and then go back and fill in the introductory parts and the description of the room and that kind of thing. Because and I feel like I'm in that sense I'm the perfect author for audio because I love dialogue, and
Mhm.
that's what comes easiest to me to write.
Have you done a couple? I know you do mostly dual.
Yes.
Have you been doing duet or thought about doing duet?
I have thought about doing duet, but I haven't actually gone forward with it. And I'm not entirely sure why. I feel like I enjoy writing I enjoy reading just the standard dual narration. And I don't necessarily I know that doing it the other way might be a little bit more complicated in terms of the production aspect. So for me, there's not enough of a difference personally, I think, in the listening experience for me to have gone that route. That's not to say that I never will. I just haven't. I guess I just haven't thought about it as necessary yet. One thing I will say is that I'll oftentimes make a decision to make a story dual point of view for the sheer fact that I want to have a male narrator for the audiobook. Whereas perhaps in the past, I was just writing books in the female point of view because it worked better for the story to have the male be a mystery in terms of his what his thinking was and what his motivations were. For some stories that really works better, not necessarily knowing what the male is thinking, but oftentimes I will now make a decision to make sure that the male point of view is in there because I want to hear a male narrator as well as a female too. I want that experience of both. So it may actually, you do have to think about that going into writing the story.
Since you listen to audiobooks, do you also listen to romance audiobooks, or do you listen to a completely different genre?
The only genre I listen to other than romance is nonfiction.
Mhm.
So like an autobiography, I'll listen to, or a book about like anxiety or meditation or some like thing that I can like a self-help type book. So I'll listen to self-help type books as well as someone's autobiography. But in terms of fiction, I'm pretty much exclusively romance. It's what I enjoy the most, and you just don't have enough time to really read. I feel like I don't have enough time to read all of the romance books that I would want to read. So I don't end up venturing out into other forms of fiction.
So, gonna put you a little bit on the spot, just a little bit.
Okay.
Um, do you have favorite narrators that you like to listen to? Not about. Don't worry about hiring them or anything like that, but just like listen to.
Yeah, Zachary Weber. I love his voice. I just feel like he can do anything. He can the accents is perfect, and his voice to me is just very soothing. Um, so I really love his voice. Someone who's up and coming, whose voice I love, is Desiree Ketchum. She's only, she's new on the scene, but I feel like her voice too is it's very youthful, and
Mhm.
I feel like her voice is a good match for a lot of characters that I might imagine in my head. Andy, of course, is the quintessential smooth, awesome female voice too, and I use her like for the majority of my books because I just love her voice. So yeah, I definitely have some favorites that I like to listen to for sure. But anyone that I've used obviously is a favorite, or is someone that I would love to listen to as well. But yeah, I find myself as well looking for the narrator first as an audiobook listener, and then second, choosing amongst the stories that they've narrated.
Well, sometimes there's also so many authors out there that when it comes down to pinpointing, and they have so many different varieties and stories, whether it's within the contemporary, you have all the different tropes, whether it's paranormal, again, then you have even more subtropes
Oh
and
yeah.
things like that to be able to kind of at least know that you like a voice tends to narrow down the choices a little bit to some extent.
It makes it a little bit easier. Absolutely. Like if, if you're in the mood to listen to a British sounding person, you might pick a Shane East book. And then among the Shane East books, you're picking the story that,
Yeah.
that resonates with you. So it does help you to narrow down what you want. Absolutely true.
Now, I know that authors tend to not read their reviews.
Mhm.
And I know that sometimes the idea of reviews can make the author cringe.
Yes.
But as someone that does do reviews, and as someone that, and not only myself, but I have peers that love, reviewing the books that they love, what are
Mhm.
some of the suggestions that you may have that are beneficial for an author when it comes down to people writing reviews, besides saying, oh my God, this is awesome?
Writing a review, I feel like, is very difficult.
Hmm.
I don't want to be writing reviews myself because I actually think it's a very difficult thing to do. Because it's very difficult to explain how a story made you feel without giving away spoilers. And I feel like there are some people that are able to write reviews that somehow tell you in general what the story's about, how it's going to make you feel without giving anything away. So for me, I cringe, of course, as an author when someone gives away a spoiler. That's pretty much the worst thing that can happen to an author. He worked so hard to build a story that is going to somehow surprise people, and then someone, if they're telling the story like a book report in a review, it's just so disappointing. And as an author, you can't say anything. You can't comment. You can't say, "Please take away your review." It's disheartening when you see reviews that tell the person, why should that person buy the book now? They've just read the entire book report. So I would say, like, the reviews that are most helpful for authors are the reviews that explain how the book made someone feel. So the author gets a feel for, whether they sort of hit the mark on what they were trying to achieve in terms of bringing out certain emotions in people. But, there are certain reviews that do help an author. I don't want to say, like, no author wants to receive a critical review, but I feel like sometimes the good, solid 3-star reviews, which, by the way, no author wants to receive a 3-star review. They want 4 and 5-star reviews because they want to, they want someone to really have loved the book. But I find that sometimes if I go to the 3-star reviews, in those reviews, you can find some areas where things could have been improved, or where you went wrong, or where maybe you rushed something. So I as an author try to steer clear of reading reviews as a habit. But there's a certain period of time early on where I'll pay attention to the reviews, and then I'll stop, because continuously doing it, like almost like a obsessive compulsive thing where you're just constantly reading them, is not helpful. It gets too much in your head. But reviews can definitely be helpful to an author if they are respectfully critical. But yeah, the main thing, just no spoilers. That's
Yes.
every author will agree. Please don't write spoilers and ruin the experience for someone else, because there's just no reason for that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I know that one of my pet peeves with reviewers sometimes is when re they basically reworded the blurb,
Yes.
and I'm
Right.
going, that's not a review. You just
Right.
telling me what the blurb already told me.
Yeah.
And I look for, like, what you were saying. How did you feel? I'm not a crier, so if a book's gonna make me cry, that's a good book. So one of the things I like to do with my guests towards the end of the episode is to play a game called Would You Rather?
Okay.
Yeah. So if you have a couple more minutes with me.
Sure.
Yeah. So would you rather always be 10 minutes late or 20 minutes early?
20 minutes early. I'm early to everything. It gives me anxiety to be late, for sure.
Yeah. Would you rather know the history of every object you touch or be able to talk to animals?
I don't care about what I touch. I'm not really, like, freaked out by anything. So I think talking to animals would be way more interesting and amusing.
Would you rather be able to teleport anywhere or be able to read minds?
I think I would rather be able to teleport everywhere. Sometimes I don't want to know what people are thinking, and I don't want people to know what I'm thinking. So I think, given, especially since I have a fear of flying, I
Oh,
think
that would help you.
teleporting everywhere would be awesome.
Would you rather never have to clean a bathroom again or never have to do dishes again?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I actually think I would rather clean the bathroom, believe it or not, because dishes are like constant and they just seem to pile up. And I think, the bathroom I can space out a little more. So I would say like I would definitely forego the dishes.
You are only number two of about 20 people that I've asked this.
That's funny.
But
Oh my
you're the only one that gave me that logic. So I can kind of see where you're coming from as far as, timing goes.
gosh, you're so smart. Sure.
Yeah. Would you rather be able to control fire or water?
Control fire or water. I think fire. Fire is extremely scary to me, and I often fear fire starting and me not knowing how to put it out. So I would say fire.
Would you rather be invisible or be fast?
Oh gosh, invisible would be probably preferred because I think there are certain situations that you're very uncomfortable and you might get anxiety, and if you could just disappear on cue, that would be great.
That would be good. No, I don't want to be here anymore. Bye.
Yeah, exactly. Spontaneously combust.
Yeah. No, just walk. No, I'm not walking into that one. Would you rather always be hot or always be cold?
I hate the heat. I absolutely hate the heat because I feel like it's much harder to control for some reason. Like if you're super, super hot, I just feel like if you're cold, you can just pile on the blankets and pile on and warm up very easily. Whereas when you're super hot, it just takes much more to cool down. And I hate sweating. So I would say absolutely would much rather be cold.
I always say you can always put like layers on, like you said, but you can't take
Yeah,
everything off.
absolutely.
Would you rather tell everyone your guilty pleasures or never partake in any of your guilty pleasures again?
Definitely, I would rather tell everybody my guilty pleasures. I don't feel like I have a lot of things that I'm not an open book about, and I don't care too much what people think about certain things. So I feel like I would much rather just tell people than never be able to engage in my guilty pleasures again.
Good. Last one. Would you rather have a personal chef or a personal masseuse?
Okay, this is gonna sound funny, but my husband's a really good cook, and he cooks a lot, and I feel like I already have a personal chef. If I could add a masseuse onto that, that would be perfect. I would have both.
So before we go, why don't you let us know what's going on in your world as far as what's coming up in releases?
Yeah, okay. So I have my next solo book coming out at the end of August. So that will be a solo book by Keelan and I. Also have one last co-written book coming up in October, and that's put out by Montlake Romance, which is a division of Amazon Publishing. So there are two more books essentially for the upcoming year. And so I will be announcing my August book probably sometime at the end of this month, at the end of June or July.
And any other audiobooks that you have yet to release?
Well, those two books that I mentioned will both be in audio. My August book right now, I have it would probably be narrated in July, and right now I have Sebastian York and Andy Arndt lined up to narrate that one, and so that one will hopefully go off without a hitch, so that everybody can listen to it when the book releases. Probably, as of right now, the release date is at the very end of August. So my goal is to have a simultaneous release. We'll also have Sebastian and Andy narrating, hopefully, the book that we have coming out in October, which is the co-write that actually has already been announced as of this time, which is Happily Letter After, which is the last book that we have coming out this year.
Excited. Yeah, I love them too. I love those Sebastian and Andy. They're great.
I do use them a lot because honestly, they're sort of just like my mainstays, and just love both their voices.
Well, thank you, Penelope, for being my guest of this year's Audiobook Lovin Series. I greatly appreciate your time.
Thank you, Viviana. I really appreciate being here. I've listened to this podcast before and really enjoyed it, so I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Oh, thank you. Until next time, happy listening.
Thank you for joining us in the Audiobook Lovin Series, hosted by Viviana, Enchantress of Books. We hope you have enjoyed this episode, as well as the series. We've included audio samples of our guests' work within the post for you to check out. Please make sure to visit the main page, linked within the post, to learn more about the series, the authors, and the narrators. Please consider leaving a review wherever you listen to the series if you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to follow us on our social media platforms and subscribe to the Viviana Enchantress of Books newsletter. Until next time, happy listening. Audiobook Lovin hopes you've enjoyed this program.